Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to see y'all this morning. If you're new to the channel, absolutely thank y'all for being here. In chat while you're there, I'll try to keep up as best I can and answer all your questions on just about any topic you have um, about law enforcement or current affairs, whatever. I'll do my best, but be respectful of the mods, families, and each other. And so I've just normally for our morning watch, we'll have a couple, three slides and discuss. Just like I said, tonight there, as I went in and did some research and was looking at any updates, there's nothing new on the Delphi for Richard Allen that I saw. There was a little bit of DNA issue with Kohlberger, so we'll start with that. Let me move to him. That Kohlberger's defense team has brought in a genetic genealogist to verify that the prosecution gathering of the DNA was done correctly and appropriately, and they will get use of it. So we'll just have to see. Now, these are claims made by, of course, the defense, and it's part of the things that we see in our court systems. And it is extremely interesting, and that they just need to have. We see it, and we saw it in every trial that you will see with DNA. The prosecution says that they have released whatever is available, and of course, the defense will say that it was either gathered improperly or without the part or improperly through the court systems, and even the handling of. And of course, there's rumors, everything from that it's been planted, and which, just the rumor mill doesn't mean it's going to be brought into court as such. But as we saw with the OJ trial, that if there's any mishandling of evidence, then of course it can absolutely come back to bite the prosecution. And then on the Long Island serial offender, on his part of it, there's been some arguments about, is it all the victims and bodies that have been found, are they linked to one offender or two? For the fact that the Manorville butcher and parts being found there and then being found in the same grounds associated with Rex's 4 victims that he's been associated with, and which is interesting. Everything that you see out there going on while this court stuff is extremely interesting, and things that we have to focus on and try to understand. Let's see who's in chat. There's Jocelyn. Good to see you. Miranda Lee. Good to see you again. Call me Kitty. Badger Mama. Good morning. Rosemary's here. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. There's Copper Horse. Good to see you. There's Gail. Ricky Watson. Mindy Harris. Dwayne. Prospecting Adventures. Good to see you again. Mary Jerkins. Miranda Lee says, I'm up early because I'm having surgery in the morning. Well, we wish you the best and in full recovery as quick as possible. Let us know. And let's see here. Nightbot is out and active. Mrs. Stephen Nightbot. There's Wanda Brown. Good to see you. And yeah. And like I said, if y'all have any questions or anything that strikes you, and there's Dave. He'll want to know what's on the menu for tonight. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I earlier today, like I said, we just still trying to get everything cleaned up and move and trying to research and prepare for our trip up to the Midwest and then heading out to Idaho. There's a lot going on with the cold cases, and I'm just trying to get caught up on those. And so most of these morning watch shows will just pretty much have we'll talk about anything and everything, because regardless, it pretty well heads that way. No matter how structured it is. When Mrs. Steve isn't here to keep me on the straight and narrow, I tend to wonder. Oh, me. Let's see. See what else has happened. Blackwater, good to see you. Oh, there's a standoff in LA. Hadn't seen that. Let's see what the standoff in LA is. Let's see. Okay, from a pursuit. Okay. All right. Been in a lot of pursuits in my career. Pursuits are extremely dangerous, and bad things can happen in those. In there. Oh, Dave's out driving again. Okay. Not all who wander are lost. I stay lost quite a bit sometimes. But good to see you there, Sharon Edwards. Also, while I was cleaning up and during our member show earlier, in the last few days, as I was cleaning up the desk and getting everything packed, I came across some of my early career pictures, and Mrs. Steve is going to put them in her blog, of course, and so I'm still in some of her thunder, and I shared it with some of my members earlier today, and so we have some of those for show and tell, and then of course I got some of my exhibits that I built over the years. Dave says he'll take a number 4. So we'll just mess around and talk about a little bit of the, if you have a case you want asking questions about, or if y'all want to see some of the things. Let me see. I got to take that off. Let's get rid of that for a minute so I can show and tell for a minute or two. Here's a shell casing I made one time. Some of the members have seen this. And of course, I got a shotgun shell I made. Just messing around tonight, guys. And then a spent casing for a pistol. There you go. And then, of course, I built me a big old pistol. Oh, me. Let's see here. Mindy Harris said that the cops had guns drawn on some guy a couple of blocks from us today. I don't know what he did or if they caught him. If they had guns on him, there's generally a reason for that. Now, do officers sometimes pull guns quicker than what they should? Used to, absolutely. It's gotten a little bit, they're starting to have a little bit more training about presenting firearms on some of the lower class instances. But until we see someone's hands and the dangers that are involved in law enforcement, luckily or unfortunately in my career, I was, although I was shot at numerous times, I was never hit. um, thankfully, but had enough gunfire that it's not good. Had some interesting times. Some of those encounters were quite close. And so for y'all that haven't seen me when I was a young guy, and this is, let's see, I was telling them these would be 30, almost, yes, probably 30 to 34 years ago when these pictures were made. There's when I was a little bit old, young feller sitting in one of our, or sitting in the office, the old office before they built a new jail. This would have been back in the early 90s. And for some reason, and I don't know what the case was on this one, I was in the floor holding a revolver. You can see there's some shell casings there on the floor, and evidence bag and a box that evidently we were doing some type of testing or demonstration or something with the investigators, that we were discussing something. And but Mrs. Steve, she says I was a baby back then. And then whoever my partner was on that day that just decided to take a picture of me driving. I'll tell you, law enforcement officers and their cameras, absolutely amazing. Oh, Miranda Lee says, True Crime, can you go more into detail with the plans you have to search for Dior and what resources and equipment you'll be using? I really want to get out there to the reservoir. We're going to try to figure out, and I know that they put divers into the reservoir and within the Timber Creek, I think it's Stone Lake or something like that, or Stone Reservoir is the name of that water. But I really want to see if there's any deep holes, and so I may, or I will be taking some type of equipment to get the true depth. I mean, the depth of that reservoir can be, it may be 4 feet, 5 feet, or it may have holes in it that's 20, 30, or 40 feet deep. And until I find out the exact layout of the of that reservoir, and if there's certain depths, and you can have pockets and everything else, but I'm really interested in the reservoir for the fact that on 2 occasions they said K9s tracked there from the campsite to the reservoir, and which I find extremely interesting. And I've made a lot of recoveries from reservoirs, and both moving water and lake waters or still waters, and because it's not easy to recover an individual from any type of water environment. I've worked whereas we'd have drag teams and we'd have divers at the same time. Sometimes the divers would be successful, sometimes the drag teams would be. And all my recoveries, while dive teams may have been there, but my recoveries, I was always on the drag team, and I was able to find them. But if we get out there and we find that the reservoir is of substantial depth, then we'll have to look at possibly introducing some drones and things. I'm not going to go in as a diver, but there are certain drones and submersible vehicles that are accessible and are highly effective. And, as technologies get better, that'd be the stuff that we'll look at. As far as the landslide areas, we'll have to look at them and see how dangerous they are, because in some of the, rock shell and you can see where there is a almost like above the campground in the Google Earth, a part of the mountainside that appears to be almost rock slide type materials. Won't know what that looks like until I get there. And and I'm sure that they've had K9s all over that before, but I'll be talking to our geologists and and getting some information about certain rock structures and how it behaves, and what it looked like prior to. So there's a lot of things to look at before we go out there. All right. Okay, Rosemary says that the helicopter left low on fuel, but they got him in custody. That's good. Jocelyn says, I love show and tell time. There's not a lot of show and tell, but every now and then, like I said, um, over the years, I've made all different types of props and things. I enjoy doing that stuff sometimes. Hello, Stacy. Good to see you. And Copper Horse, Land of the Giants. Um, yes, Land of the Giants. Because I don't know what it would take to fire a shell. Although there's howitzers and certain big guns that would fire shells that size. Gail said that would be some kind of pistol. Yes, because I don't even know how big of a holster it would take to holster that pistol. Where would you wear it? Have to pull it around the wagon behind you. Tech Deaf Hippie, good to see you. Annie, good to see you. Oh, 3 Bearcats. Perp had severe injury to thigh. Oh, what we'll do is Mrs. Steve will scan those in, and I'll have a slideshow, and we'll have probably this sometime in one of these morning watch. We'll just talk mostly about law enforcement careers, and I'll give you. I've got plenty of. I don't know how many pictures I got of my career, but we'll get some type of little show together, and we can talk about some of the stories to be told. Miss Persevere, how you doing? Good to see you. Yes, for whenever we do the depth of the pond of that reservoir, of course, yes. There's several different ways to do it, and of course, that would be um, something that we will have. Uh, they make no bigger than that reservoir is. It's not that big, so um, you got everything from we can use some low tech sonars with everything from a kayak up to some type of inflatable boat. But yeah, we've got all that's within the possibilities of what we'll go out there with. Ricky said, I spent 21 years in law enforcement, and I, I think he meant I wouldn't trade a day of it. And I agree. You served a year longer than I did 20 years and out. But I hope I had a good career. I feel like I had a pretty good career. Rosemary J says, "See, were you in the military before your career in law enforcement?" No, I was the youngest child, and I thought about a military career. My father served, brother served, but I thought about a military career. But I was the youngest child, and my oldest brother was in the military. My other brother was out with family. My sister, of course, was out, and I was the youngest child at home, and my mother was disabled. And so I had to make a choice, and my mother and father were divorced. And so I stayed home, went in law enforcement, and took care of my mother. And although my brothers and sisters would have probably stepped up, but they had families all on their own. But so I just, like I said, decided to just go in law enforcement. Dave says, we need images of you putting cuffs on people at the Shoney's. Actually, I may have, um, I may have some of that um, uh, old car dash cam. I'll have to look and see if I have that. because I do have a lot of dash cam, and that's a good idea, Dave. I can go through that. I just, but back then the dash cams were VCRs. And I have, I don't know, I probably have several hundred hours of dash cam videos from my career. So I'll have to go through that. Um, and some of it's good, some of it's not so good. Carol Freer is from Iowa. I was up in Iowa not too long ago. Oh, three stadies just went by Dave. They weren't pursuing him. Miranda said, true crime, of what age to what age did you serve the 20 years law enforcement? I had just turned 22. And then when I was 42, I retired after 20 years and built another business and did some consulting. And here we are now. Oh, let's see here. Love to Hunt says, I always want to be a detective, but I never got there. Never too late. Rosemary says, you're a good man, Steve. Send Mrs. Steve our love. Appreciate that. And absolutely, Mrs. Steve is asleep, and I can't wake her right now to tell her that. But she did pull out the roses. We were over there, and she said, oh, here's those roses you bought me. And so I got to see them again today. And even in the box, they've deteriorated a little bit. That's surprising that even in a box, some of the rose petals, even from artificial ones, will fall off the stem. Found that interesting. All right. Now, this is something that a lot of departments have done, and it's absolutely something great that should be done. That the county has opening for co-case volunteers. Where do you typically start when taking on a co-case? The biggest thing and I'm sure that every department probably will have different procedures and everything, but for me, the greatest thing and what I always start with is the victimology. Absolutely understanding everything about that victim and starting with what they did for at least the previous 30 days. And then of course you can go out from that, because mathematically and statistically you will cross paths and have some type of prior crossing with whoever the offender is that committed a homicide on a cold case within those 30 days. Sometimes it can be less, but within those 30 days, the majority of time, you cross paths with a person that would cause you harm. And you see that quite often. But for me, that's where I start at. Now, on the cold cases, the first question a lot of times I'll ask the family is, what do you think happened? And because they've been the center of attention and focus of everything that they've done is about what happened to their loved one. They've heard all the rumors. People have called them. People have sat down and told them information. Law enforcement's told them certain things sometimes. And so from the victimology, then to the family, and what do you think happened and why? Because they'll generally give you who they think is the offender. Not always right, but they'll give you that. Sometimes it is right, and they just didn't have enough evidence. But that's what I always did. And then if we take what happened in Delphi, you absolutely have to go back and look at. And it was through the victimology of Libby and Abby that they would have come across Kegan Kline. And that's just basic law enforcement of who did they talk to prior to them going out that day and crossing paths with individuals such as being catfished, and what was the conversation. So that's what the victimology does. But it always, like I said, we don't know when Richard Allen run across them and at what time. Let's see here. Okay. Carol said that she's at the opposite end of Iowa, the Southwest. All right. Mindy Harris says, why do you think they aren't turning over the DNA in the BK case? What do you think the reasoning is? I'm confused by that. I thought they had to show all evidence against the accused. And I I agree with you. I believe that all the reports that have been released, um, that discovery in the court systems would ensure that it was released. Um, I don't understand where the defense is coming from when they say that one of the labs is being kept secret, or is not. They're not telling them what lab it was that performed certain things, and I don't even see how that's possible. I'm sure the courts will clarify at some point, but we're only hearing that from the defense. And is did a lab do some work on something and didn't turn in a report? And they were wanting to know what those findings were. I don't know, because the prosecution, anything they're going to use in court, and they, they have to release it. Now, if they're not going to use it, maybe that's the argument, that they're not going to be bringing that into the court, and it's not exculpatory, because if you're not going to use it and it is exculpatory, which the prosecution isn't going to use anything that shows that Kohlberger wasn't involved. But if they have that evidence, they have to turn that over too, or he'll just instantly, when that information comes out, it will change the verdict if he was found guilty. So I don't understand. I'm with you. WW, good to see you. Are you willing to share what business you did after you retired from law enforcement, or what you've done since starting your YouTube channel? I'm in the firearm industry. I do a lot of shooting, but also I did some consulting, and I work with several schools, as far as going in, and to the high schools and some of the career training academies that there are around. I've gone in and done numerous seminars for those kids, and discussed cold cases, discussed investigations, evidence collection, things of that nature over the years. Tried to keep up with what was going on, and trying to stay relevant to the times. It says, Ricky says, if I didn't have neck surgery, I would go back into law enforcement. Yeah, I hate that you have any neck or back. That's something you have to have. You don't want to get in a headlock or have back issues, because some of my injuries, sometimes, you'll twist your back, get out of alignment, and it's hard to do your job if you're not. Back when I was young, it was nothing. But once you get into your 40s and 50s, and you see some of the officers out there that's in their 50s and 60s, and it's extremely dangerous. They can still do their job, but I always worried about them, because um, you take a beating on your, as far as physical. You break a lot of bones. I broke a lot of bones. All my old finger bones and both hands been broken so many times. Um, but that just happens. Thank you, Annie. That's very nice of you to say. She says thank you to Mr. or thank you and Mrs. Steve for everything you've done and doing to help serve justice. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Right on, Josephine. Good to see you. Didn't Libby's sister find out through the Anthony Shots account? Um, I, I believe so, but that's where law enforcement gets almost all the victimologies from the families. That they'll go in there and ask them uh, what hobbies do they have, where do they work, what were their school hours, who were their friends, what was a typical day like, what time did they get up, what time, who did they talk to, what happened through the day, and then they'll go through the week. Um, what was our normal weekly sports events and things of that nature. There's a lot to victimology. I've got a book somewhere that I use, and I don't know where it's at. Yeah, it's not. I know where it's at upstairs, but I don't have it down here with me tonight. But I will go through that one day. We'll do a thing about victimology and some of the questions and the calendars. And all it is that if you looked at what you did um, from the time that you wake up and what are your normal activities. Do you get up? Do you make coffee? Do you cook breakfast? Who's at the house? Um, when do you leave for work? When do you take lunch? Where do you go? Do you shop? What days you shop? When do you come home? What route do you take? All that stuff, and what time do you for each of your meals, and what time do you settle down, and what shows do you watch? All that information is part of your personality, and it's part of that victimology. And then what time do you go to bed? And are you on medications and all this other stuff? There's a lot of things, but from that, law enforcement can tell from on certain days exactly what you do because you'll have your off days of what do you do on your off days? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? And what have you done in the last, and as you extend that time frame out from one day to 1 week to 1 month to 6 months to 1 year, you can get a great understanding of that individuals. And you'll also do the same thing of looking at their financials because your financial tells pretty much everything that and supports what is revealed through the family of what they think your normal days are. Yes, on the DNA for Rex, yeah, he wouldn't have had no choice. They would have. They're going to get DNA. There's a lot of ways to get DNA, and they're going to get it from him, no doubt. And now there's the. It depends on what you're going to do with that DNA. Um, if you're going to enter it into CODIS and certain things and make them as far as they going into the database, uh, some of that happens after conviction. But if you're getting DNA for an individual crime and you're obtaining a search warrant, um, that DNA is not what goes into the CODIS part of it. That DNA is what used for the court, and you'll have search warrants for that type of DNA. Now that's the way it used to be here in Georgia. I don't know what the current um, state laws and possible court rulings have come up about that. But back in our day, as we saw it, DNA come into the courts, because prior in the 80s and stuff, you know, it was in the early stages. And actually, um, right here, I have a one of the things I unpacked was a DNA crime scene evidence collection kit that came out, and these were in the early 2000s, and this one here expired in 2010, and but so this wasn't the earlier ones. The ones even before this, of course, it was just basically you had little old swabs and stuff, but within these little kits, of course, it has the stuff, names of police personnel, chain of possession, um, and delivered to the crime lab immediately, and refrigerate after use perishable evidence, because some of the DNA was through blood vials, and yeah, you had these little vials that were part of it. That if you pull blood, and then you got your little integrity seal, um, evidence tape, and this here is a drying box for a swab. That you take a swab and you put it in this little drying box and air dry it so that the DNA would be preserved. But oh, drop my tweezers out of there. They give you little tweezers for hair. Oh my goodness, there's so much stuff in there. Ain't no telling what all I have. Oh yeah. Oh man, I got a syringe and everything in here. Yeah, we can pull some blood. But that was what in that little old kit. Um, but yeah, the DNA is like I said, it may have changed for some of the court rulings. I don't know. All right. Let's see. I agree with you, Miss Persevere, that the Kohlberger case, and it's going to be a long, hard road. They're not going to go easily into the night without a hard case fought. And Julie Wilson has a good point about Hiraman on his burner phones. Yes, they're going to eat that up. Maddie B from New Zealand. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Reaction times are crucial in law enforcement. You better believe it. Sometimes my reaction times were just a little bit slow. Um, had a few broken bones just because of my slow reaction times. Yes, Miranda Lee, no problem. That's what I do the show for. I see that someone has given $10. I hadn't got to that yet, but when I find it, I will. And then we have a member. So there's y'all's blue light. But I don't know who the member is, but we appreciate y'all doing that. Wanda Brown says, "How's the mouth, the dentist visit? It's doing a lot better. Absolutely, up 99% are better now." I did a show on this last night, and absolutely think that um, it's going to be used in court. That if he did ride around late at night, how often did he turn his phone off? If he didn't turn his phone off, the prosecution is going to use that against him. That, well, on this night where the homicides, you turned it off on one side of the crime scene, and then after the crime scene, you turn it on the other side of the crime scene. So regardless, they're going to use that. But if he's out riding around a lot, why is he? Uh, see, what did Rosemarie J ask? Okay. Annie, good to see you. Yes, it won't be in CODIS until after conviction. That was the way I was understanding it, or what was. Okay, Ricky Watson became a YouTube member. Thank you, sir. There's your blue light. Appreciate you. Um, the membership, it helps us do a lot of things. I hadn't heard this. They got Rex. I had heard that they got his DNA from the pizza crust, but I hadn't heard the nickname Krusty the Clown. I had not heard that. That's interesting. It's not a pure sample and can be argued it's tainted or not as dug out garbage, not observed collection. And of course, they'll, whenever they get the probable cause, they will get a pure collection of it. Or at least that's what we always did. I don't know how they do this stuff now. And Gail Hurd, $10 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate that. Like I said, Chris and I are discussing heading out west, and we got a long ride. I looked up the mileage today. I didn't know it was, I thought it was only 18 hours from the Midwest, but it turns out it's 24 hours, which isn't that much different, but extra 6 hours. But nothing I can't do. Yep. But I appreciate everybody. In case I miss anyone else, there's blue lights for everybody, including Gail. Thank you. Yes. Yes. It's not, you can get a probable cause isn't that hard. You tell them there's a need to, and your suspicions, and base it upon some facts of why a certain individual should be um, looked at. It's not that hard to get a search warrant. Julie Wilson, thank you. Miss Persevere is going to get a crown on the 17th. Yeah, I don't like tooth pain. I don't like any kind of pain. I have a high pain tolerance, so sometimes it gets. Um, Mrs. Steve gets on to me all that um, about me sometimes. I'll go through the house and I won't know that I've cut myself or something on during working out here, and I'll go in the house and mess up her floor, and she gets upset. Or I mess up, sit down or in the recliner or something, and look over there, and there's a blood stain on the arm of the recliner. She gets upset. Between the synthetic blood and the real blood that's in this house, um, I'd hate for anyone to ever luminol. I don't know if you could luminol anything, um, from the basement to the garage to the walkways, that it wouldn't light up, either synthetic or real. What did Mindy make up? Oh, no, you're absolutely correct. That's not made up. They can get that up. Yes, I'm not going to let Chris drive, but I am thinking about getting a uh, a dash cam for my vehicle. Blinky blink, you're going to burn out Mrs. Steve blue light, and I've got to make me a blue light to take on the road um, for my next trip. Oh, yes, it's more than enough. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Yeah. Yeah, uh, I that is a g that would be interesting to, dress out just so that, I don't, cross-contaminate or, um, uh, stain any of her, furniture, have everything on BK plastic. I like the way y'all have already named the process of how to protect, uh, personal property as the BK process, BK plastic. Um, how different was it to investigate in the 90s compared to now? We had cell phones and DNA in the 90s, just not like now. Um, if you, in this one picture here of where I'm in the floor holding the firearm, over my left shoulder is filing cabinets. Those were my filing cabinets for my desk. And there's uh, three there, and then there's a couple more in there. There's no computer on that desk. That was pre-computer. We didn't have computers back then, and so everything was paper, pen, notebook, and everything was off a checklist. So when you went to a homicide or you went to a theft or a burglary, it's basically fill in the blank. You had a form, and that's what you worked off of. Didn't have tablets, didn't have smartphones, didn't have any of that, and so everything when you walked in, because when you go from this, because this is a actually this is one book of a homicide, but of just the photo part of it, it doesn't have all the evidence and everything else in it. But when you go from this to a thumb drive, there's a lot of difference, and because I know there's several hundred pictures in here, and so that's some of the difference of you know of what went on from back then to now. You know, because once the computers came in, and before we had the thumb drives, you know, you had the old CD, and it's absolutely amazing. You had the floppies, you had the CDs, and we went through all of that over the years. And but there's a lot of difference now. What have I done lit up Nightbot? No, we didn't have body cams. We had dash cams came around. When did we start using dash cams? Probably somewheres in the mid to late 90s is when we, but I have somewheres in the 90s, I have a bunch of those videos, and um, I have to go through them and see if there's any of them I can use, and because there's some good footage on them, some interactions of some of them hilarious. Let's see. Minnie, I'm drawing, carrying that big gun. Yes, Gail, that was a great question that Wanda had. Absolutely. All right, what's going on here? We've been here almost 50 minutes, man. It's passed pretty quick. Um, and appreciate everybody being here. I ain't got anything to do for a while unless y'all wander around. Uh, I still have a floppy. I guess I should get rid of them. Um, yes, I have stacks of CDs, um, floppies, and I have no way. Um, these computers now, the new laptops and computers, you can't even put a CD in them anymore. Everything's on the thumb drive. So I've got to figure out, because I've got the so much information from some of my old cases and stuff, that things like that, just what happens and how do you get that information once it's, I'll have to go out and find an old computer. Actually, I've got some old computers. I got some sitting right there that have CD ports in them and the things. Don't know if they work. Don't even know how you could log into it. I'll have to figure out. I have a brother that's big into computers, so maybe he'd be able to figure that out. Miranda Lee has a question up above. Let me see. Let's see. What did I miss? Sometimes this thing jumps, guys. And I miss things. Okay. Miranda Lee says, do you think there will be an arrest and conviction in the Evansdale case? Every case I ask you that on, you always say yes. How do you stay hopeful after so much time has passed? I think on all these cases, when you look at it as the modern technology and DNA, because Lacard's exchange principle, is so true. And we just haven't reached, and will never reach, whereas science can't improve the investigative process, because we constantly shed DNA. And when it's violent encounters, it's one thing that you may pass by someone and with no touch and just be within airspace of them and still have a DNA transfer. But when there is actual physical contact, I'm of the opinion it's impossible that knowing how DNA is, and touch DNA, and how far we've come from what it used to be to what it is now. That's what I base my hopes on, that all these cases, that if you have a victim there and they touch their clothing, they touch that person, the DNA's there. Now, did they collect it, and did they preserve the clothing correctly? And so, on the cases where there is clothing and they did find it in a relatively quick span of time, that yes, they should be able to find it. With the Evansdale case, of course, they were found 5 months later. So the crime scene itself, that science may never get to the point that, because outdoor environment isn't kind to DNA, animals and everything else isn't. But those bicycles, that purse, things like that were touched, handled, that were on the scene, that law enforcement collected. Where is it, and was it preserved correctly? And that's what I base that. At some point, if that offender touched that purse, or touched those bikes, that maybe at some point sciences will catch up and be able to bring it to a close. Brother Hunt, you can fix that by making you sit on BK plastic. Y'all guys, that's great. Let's see. Right on Joe's vein, external player. Yes, me and my Google machines and all the stuff out there that can get this stuff to working. Yeah, I'm sure there's all different types of things, because there's, like I said, there's a lot of information. I ain't no telling how much information I have on old cases on that stuff. Oh, Valerie said that. I can't imagine back then. Now, I remember when commissaries came around, When I started in law enforcement, there was no commissaries. That's something that came around in my career in our region, probably um, uh, close to in the 90s. Pre to that, you was just in a jail. Um, Now you could order stuff, but there was not a commissary in house. Family could bring you um, uh, toothpaste and things like that, but you didn't have money on the books. That didn't come around for us until the 90s. I can't imagine having to keep up with all that. Cause I'm trying to think. I don't. Did they? Yeah, they had smoking, and people could bring cigarettes in and stuff. Harold Freer says I have an external CD DVD drive, plugs into a USB port. Yeah, it would have to, because I have nothing on this thing. Julie Wilson says, you may have been asked this before, Mr. C, but do you think that Shannon Gilbert may have been slightly involved in the case at all? I have feelings she may, sadly. Um, well, she's played a part in it regardless if she's a victim of his, um, that she played a part in the uh, discovery of the Long Island serial offender, for the fact that through the search for her is what launched everything that has brought us to this day. Um, and it could just be one that she is with that one out liar that has nothing to do with it. And just through her death had led to this discovery. And, um, and so, yes, she played a part, but she also could be, um, due to that she's an escort, that there is some type of connection and maybe a past with. We just have to see. We don't really know yet. Mandy is going, good night. I'm glad you came by. Lane Seawright. Is DNA easier or better than fingerprints? I don't hear much about fingerprint these days. Actually, I have all kind of stuff laying on my desk. On the As far as which one's better, either one of them are identifiers that can identify a single person, that your DNA profile is unique to you unless you're a twin. Fingerprints are unique to you even if you have a twin. So in certain instances, fingerprints can be far more um, valuable than DNA if you have twins. But as far as other than that, and that's identical twin. Other than that one instance of that family issue, then DNA is probably from here on out is going to be the king in all the courts. But these fingerprints, like this is something I processed a few months ago with Ninhydrin, and it's been cooking in this bag for months. And I'll have to pull out when I did the show on that ransom note uh, uh, that on John Benet Ramsey, that they weren't as distinctive as they are now. They've come a long way just sitting here in hydrant cooking for several months. It gets better and better. And there's clearly defined ridge detail in there now that wasn't when I processed it in those early days. And like I said, there's a lot of different processes out there, but both of them are extremely valuable, fingerprints and DNA. All right, Ricky, I'm glad you came by. Appreciate it. Yes, that's changed over the years. That now I don't know of any government building, jails, or otherwise that have cigarettes or anything in them now. Although they're a high product, and they're still being smuggled in there. They're always going to be smuggled in. The old Acer computers. Yes, and you're right. Our technologies and our the abilities of that phone data and how we had Dylan Rounds that what was his name, James, I forget, but actually was on video, and so these phones sometimes they'll capture the offender doing certain acts. And then, of course, you got the tracking abilities, and then you got all the pings and stuff, such as, that will play such a huge part with all these cases from Delphi on. Let's see. All right. Anybody else got any questions? I've been here a little over an hour now. Just broke the hour mark. And and also, while I was messing around here on the desk, the I have no idea when these that was part of my crime scene bag um, of cotton swabs. There's 400 of these things in here, and so I, I don't know how old they are, but they were in an old uh, bucket, that plastic bucket I had, and I hadn't. We would pre-stage these back before um, some of the swabs that came out, and you would have to prep them, isolate them, store them, stage them, and then of course when they came out with the DNA collection kits, they had them in them. But pre that, and when we were all doing everything from the blood test and gathering blood swabs from different surfaces, you had to have sterile swabs that weren't exposed to any other cross contamination, and so it was a process even for handling the cotton swabs back in the day. Do you remember the first case you solved? No. I'm telling you, um, that's sad. But it would have, because what happens when you go into investigations or when you go into law enforcement, everything you do from the first day that you go into it is steps that will assist you throughout your career, even as you when you start in the jail. And when you go in and you work with the offenders that come in, for the fact that I saw it, that those first days when I went into the jail, when I was a jailer, the inmates that I dealt with in those first 6 months and first year of my career, when I went in onto the road, I dealt with those same individuals time and time again. And then after you deal with them through that process of interactions due to domestics, drug use, drug arrests, DUIs, um, warrants, um, and chases, and everything that happens in law enforcement, that when you get into investigations, the same individuals you're dealing with are then the ones that you're investigating and um, connecting to certain crimes. And so it's all a process. So that in the early days of the investigations, and you may start off with something that when you went into CID, you may be in the forgery, you may be in thefts, um, and um, lower tier crimes. And as your career progresses, and your command staff says, "Oh, you have certain skill sets," or, "Hey, do you want to? What do you want to do with the investigative part?" And I chose to go into trying to educate myself when the CSI stuff came out, and so I absolutely seized upon it. Went and got that certification, and it changed my life and changed our department's path of how they work crime scenes. And so, um, but it's always that by the time, you see some of these people talk about these investigators that are on the stand talking about homicides and how they're able to uh, compartmentalize themselves and disassociate themselves of when they're talking about the crime scene. Um, and it's due to that same career path that you see, and it prepares you for the next stage, because by the time you get to CID, you've probably, if you've worked the road um, any time at all, you go to those death and, where you have car accidents, you see all the death from there. You'll go to the domestics, or you'll go to a homicide. And so you see a lot of victims. And so by the time that you get to be a homicide investigator, you've may already seen, you know, maybe 200 or 300 deceased people. And so, you, by the time the end of your career, you've seen more victims than um, imaginable. And like I said, it's just compartmentalized, or, certain people handle it better than others. Some people can't handle it at all, and they never go that path. Let me see. Get caught back up here. James Brenner. That's right, Copper Horse. Thank you. I knew it was James something. I'm getting old. Miranda Lee, you're right. If you work in the same county, you get to know the criminals who live there. Yes, and and I spent my whole life in this county, and so I knew a lot of them. Mrs. Steve is upstairs, Gail, sound asleep. Snarky says uh, that they believe that the Delphi case, Florida case, is corrupted by LE and prosecutor. What's your opinion? You know, I'm sure there's always, that's one of the things that comes into almost every cold case, is that there's someone that's linked, and um, and that it's corruption. Now, did law enforcement make missteps? Yes. Did they not find Richard Allen after he spoke to law enforcement early on? And so it does open that door that people say, well, see, it proves that law enforcement knew who he was from the first days, but someone covered the trail up. I I don't have that yet, and I don't see that. That just for the fact that he was missed. Why was he missed? And that will be answered in court at some point. And then we can go. If someone says, "Oh yes, I knew him, and I had a real good relationship with him, and I didn't think he did it," or something, it's not so much that it's corruption. It's just that someone fooled or misled, and their ruse and alternate life uh, just uh, put them out of the uh, ability to be a suspect. We see that a lot. You'll deal with people. How many people in your life have you looked at and talked to that you have thought that no, they couldn't have ever done that. I never knew that they would do that to me, or uh, or steal from their own family. Yeah, Wanda, that is a good question. There was something going on while there's something happened in the presence of those individuals at the house that put Shannon on the alert. And what was it? I don't know. Thank you, Julie, for coming by. Snarky, have you delved into Brandon Woodhouse case at all? No, I haven't, not yet. And Love to Hunt says, I think they knew for a long time it was Richard Allen, but they needed more. And I think they may have known probably 6 to 8 months, if that long. I think it says that he came across their desk, I think in October or something like that. But anyway, guys, I appreciate y'all being here tonight, and y'all have a great night. And I'm gonna go up and try to get past all those canines that's in Mrs. Steve's room. Them dogs. She has 4 of them up there right now, and they whenever I disturb them, they bark at me. I don't know why. It's not like I hadn't known them since they were puppies, but they still bark at me. One of them even bites me. But anyway, y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see y'all soon. Appreciate y'all being here. Like the video, share it, and we'll see y'all next time. Night, night.